throw this in the air like that to attract
Alright.
The mustard on my hand. One moment.
You guys are gonna look weird if I hold this pillow in my lap.
Hey guys!
Put your chin on the bed!
Should have seen David a minute ago. He was like this. He's like, can I lay on the bed like this? I was like, no.
No, you asked me
No.
to sit on the bed.
This is a PG hunt recap. So we got one bar on this battery. We might have to split this up and do a couple batteries. So we have 2 batteries with 1 bar. Anyways, we wanted to kind of sit down and do this hunt breakdown, I guess what you would call it, while everything's kind of fresh in our heads and whatnot. But we're back in the hotel. Good one. And our buck is in the back of the car, and we're ready to start packing up. Probably get on the road, heading back to Michigan tomorrow. But just wanted to kind of go over some of the experiences that we had. We technically only hunted for 2 days because we had a day of travel, and then we hunted 2 days, and then we'll have another day of travel or 2 days of travel, depending on how much. Not 2 days, but maybe a day and a half of travel. Depending on if we get a hotel or not. But so anyways, I guess starting with like the trip down.
David. Start that
You
over.
have like a, so anyways,
burp
Give me your Sprite.
You got like a burp glosh at the end.
I want to do a burp montage at the end. So on the way down, I guess just so you know, so we've been hunting in the Kansas County, and I got drawn for units. Those are the 2 units that I got. So I had 2 areas I was looking at. One was the area, which I know. I know there's big bucks in there, and then the Topeka area, there's a bunch of public land up there. So that was the 2 areas I was kind of looking at, and I didn't realize how big Topeka is, because before we traveled down, I was trying to do some research to see like what the populations densities were for the surrounding towns and cities, and Topeka is about the same population count as Grand Rapids, which is a really big city. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be brutal.
You're like editing, like click, 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 click.
Edit all the burps out. So after
Shut up.
Shut up. So after I got the population on Topeka and I realized how big of a city that was and how close all that public was to that city, I opted that we should start in, and then depending on how things go, if we feel like we're struggling to get on deer or spots.
I'm sorry, I can't. David grabbed the Sprite again. David, just leave it. He's literally like 5 hours with the Sprite.
Alright, come on guys, let's get through this. Come on, you can do it.
Okay.
We decided to start and then work our way back up to Topeka. Just do it that way, just because it seemed less of a population down here. So I just kind of guessed there'd be less hunters. So we ran into a really big thunderstorm on the way down. David kept saying, "I can see why they have tornadoes down here, because like the high winds and everything." We were driving on the highway, and I was looking on Onyx, and there was some public that we were passing, and I looked down onto the public, and I saw a big buck on the public in the field, which was crazy, I thought. So that was day 1, which was just traveling, essentially. Our first morning here in Kansas, we just decided to drive around on the roads. There's lots of fields. We don't have any spots. Just drive around and see what we see. And so we started driving. We were like, what, 10 minutes in? 15 minutes?
Probably 15 to 20, yeah.
15 to 20 minutes in, and we were talking, and we were like, man, we're not seeing anything. Like, this isn't good.
Yeah, like nothing out in the field.
It's like first light, and we're like,
Nothing. This might be difficult.
yeah, we're like, this could be harder than we thought. But then as soon as we said that, like, boom, big buck just runs right across the road in front of us. Like, big freaking buck. Like, 140-inch deer. David was like, holy crap. Like, we were all just kind of freaking out. Like, that was a big deer, and it was right in front of our car. So then we kept driving, and over the course of the entire morning, I think we saw probably 10 different bucks. Yeah. I'd say, I don't know, 4 of them were big bucks, I would say, over 150 inches. We drove out to this one area, and the biggest buck that we'd seen the whole time was on this dirt road. We looked off to the side and it was on private, but there was some public kind of kitty corner to this. But it was just a freaking huge buck with the doe, and he was just sitting in the field. I don't know how big he was, but he was probably like, I don't know, I could see him going 170 easy. I think he was like a 12 or 13 pointer or something like that.
Did you get footage of him?
Mm-hmm. That big wide one.
I describe him as yay big.
He is
you
big.
Work out.
I'll go like this.
Yay big.
Yes, in general, all the bucks that we were seeing were on private.
Yep.
There was some areas that had a little more public in the vicinity, and so some of the deer that we were seeing were close to public, but most all of them were on private fields. We decided to walk the first area, and we got out and walked the whole thing, and there was tons and tons of sign on it, like scrapes, rubs everywhere, burps everywhere. I thought we were going to jump a buck pretty much the whole time, but we did not. That was kind of a bust.
So we went back to kind of home base where we saw that big buck jump out, and we were like, okay, we know this is a good area. We've seen a lot of bucks around. And we're just driving through, and I noticed 2 deer. They're right back to back, and I was like, I think one of them's a buck. And we look, and one of them was.
Kind of looked like a double silhouette because they were perfectly in line with each other.
Yeah.
I had to put the car in reverse and be like, so I could actually see how big the deer was.
And then they just took off, and they went behind this kind of a ridge thing. There was kind of a drainage. And so Jake was on his phone, and he's like, oh man, he's kind of distracted. Then he's like, oh wait, this is public.
This is all public.
We can hunt these deer. Let's go chase the buck.
I was like, crap, I should have been paying attention to what was going on.
So we kind of took a guess where they went because we couldn't really see exactly. We got out of the car, and we start stalking this buck.
So I got to sit in the car by myself and watch the road to make sure that they didn't run off somewhere.
So we got way out there looking for these deer.
And we see nothing.
Absolutely
Well,
nothing.
we get out there. The drainage that I thought that they jumped down into is not really a drainage at all. It's just some grass, some knee-high grass. The whole field is knee-high grass. So once we get out there, we realize, well, if they're here, they've seen us, and they've had to have run off. But if they ran off, we would see them run off, and we don't see anything, so they're not here. So then we went back to the car. We were seeing deer tracks crossing the road by where we had parked, so then we were second guessing, did they even go where we thought they did? Probably not. They probably crossed this road while we were not paying attention. But that was pretty much a lost opportunity at what could have been a nice stalking opportunity. But we didn't have any kind of a plan for the evening, really. We knew where the good area was, and there was one piece of public that we kind of wanted to go into, but every time that we drove by, there was guys parked there. So we didn't want to try to go in there, and we didn't want to mess them up. So essentially we went and walked a fence line way out into a big grass field where there's a little pocket of trees that was on private, and we were just trying to kind of hunt the downwind edge of that private woods and just hoping that maybe a deer would walk out into the public field and we would get a shot at it. We got all the way down to the corner, and there was a little scrape right there under the corner, so I sat in the scrape, and then they sat off to the side, and then we had a little buck that I jumped while I was sitting down trying to get set up, and he ended up coming back. Pretty much walked right up to us. I could have never shot him because he never crossed that public-private line, but I mean, he wasn't anything close to something I'd want to shoot, but it was still pretty cool to see it. And we got to experience sandburgers for the first time. Horrible. Well, we've still been picking them out. They're all over the carpet in here, but they're nasty. They
Sorry, motel people, if you're watching this.
They stick in you. You get splinters. I still have splinters in my fingers.
I have a splinter in my thumb and my pointer.
Yeah, we don't have those back home. Our burrs back home are they're not that bad compared to sandburrs. Sandburrs are awful. That was the end of day 1 of
Full
hunting.
Yeah.
So day 2 of hunting today. What do we do this
Wait, no, let's do this more creatively. I'll say day, you say number, and you say 2. Day.
Number.
Wow.
I knew David was screwed up.
Let's try that again. Ready? Day.
Number.
2.
Day.
Number.
2.
What was that? 2 of them?
Did you say toot? Day number 2. So that was today. Yeah. So this morning we woke up late. got out, started driving back to that area where there's that big buck, all those bucks that we've been seeing and trying to get on. We didn't see anything driving around, so we just decided that we would slip into that spot where those trucks have been parked on.
And it's like almost 400 acres or something.
That's a lot of property, but it's also pretty open. A lot of it's like previously pasture land and stuff. So we kind of just walked up, and there's like a little hedge of trees right there that kind of come out to a point, but we just kind of sat on that point of cover, and we were trying to see stuff out into that pasture, and we did. Right away, we had 3 does walk in to like a spot. I'm assuming they were bedding down, but that was on our way in, so we hadn't even got set up or sat down yet, and we saw those deer. So that was cool. Found some cedar trees, and we just kind of tucked up in those. We heard a guy rattling. That was pretty interesting. He was kind of on the other side of the property, but he was trying to do some calling and stuff. Our wind wasn't that great. It was kind of blowing down the edge of the property / into the property, so it wasn't amazing, but we didn't really have any better ideas, and we were seeing deer, so yeah, what the heck. So they're all hunkered down by a log, and I'm standing up trying to see out into the CRP stuff, and I spot a deer walk out up onto the dirt road, and it was a little spike buck, I think. He's just walking around on the road, and then all of a sudden he cuts into the woods that we're in, and he starts walking right towards us. So we're getting footage of this guy, and he walks right past us, and I was like, dang, that's cool. Maybe another deer will do that. Well, another deer does do that. I look, and there's like a freaking big rack crossing the road, jumping the fence. Like, I'm like, holy crap, this deer is going to do the exact same thing that the spike buck just did. So the first thing that was going through my mind is, I'm going to get a shot of this deer. The second thing that was going through my mind is, I got to get into a spot so I can get a shot of this deer, because the spike buck had moved. Where he was moving, I didn't have like any lanes, any openings. Like, I was just too far back, pushed off of those woods. So I started moving, and I cut about like 10 yards to where I could get in some, I had a couple of lanes, a couple of holes back up in there. So then he does take the same path as the spike buck, and he comes into my first hole at like 20 yards. He's walking straight towards me, and he's looking at me through the hole. And at this point, I'm at full draw. I'd drawn back when he was coming through, and he was behind all this cover. So I'm at full draw, and he's in my shooting lane, and he's looking at me, and my pin is just like floating on his nose. Like, I could just totally take out his jugular right now. Like, I'm like, this is tempting. Like, you got the whole throat. I mean, like, an incredible frontal shot if you do that kind of thing. But I just didn't feel confident. I was shooting an expandable, so I'm like, I don't think it's not something that I want to take. So my thought was, I'll just wait, and then as he turns to either run off because he's spooked or whatever, maybe I can, slip one in there. Well, he doesn't spook, which is ridiculous, because I'm just kneeling out in the middle of nothing, and he's at 20 yards, and he was staring me down, and he just decides, like, no big deal. Like, no problem, dog. So he just starts walking down the trail, and so I let back down. I had been holding, for I don't know how long it was, but my arms are like shot. He starts walking, and I got another opening, and he starts walking into that. So there's these 2 trees, and he starts coming behind those trees, and I'm like, yeah. Like, I clip my release, and I'm like, I'm gonna draw when he's behind those trees. So his head goes behind the trees. I clip my release on. I draw, and I look up, and I realize, shoot, his head ain't behind the trees no more. Like, he's clearly past the trees. So I'm already committed. So I get to full draw. He watched me draw pretty much the whole. He watched the whole draw cycle. So he picks his head up like, what is that moving? So then I'm on him, and I've got a tree, and I've got his leg about 3 to 4 inches in front of the tree. And so I've got a clear shot, like right for the center mass of his vitals. So I just put the pin on it, boom, snap it off, and bam! Like, I freaking smoked that tree that was right behind his leg. Like, just destroy it. All of a sudden, I hear in the background, I hear, yeah, and I'm like looking back, I'm like, what is yeah about this? Like, I just freaking smoked this tree.
I don't think me and David could even see what had happened, because I just heard like like he smoked something, and I was like, that was the buck. And so I start like sitting up a little, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, so the buck runs like 10 steps and then stops and looks back at me like, I wonder what that was. You know, I'm just thinking, this is the freaking stupidest deer I have ever tried to kill. So then I just watch him. Like he walks down this wood lot and then he walks back towards the road a little ways, and I'm guessing he just jumped the road and then went back onto the private side. He doesn't give me any more shot opportunities. I almost thought I would be able to get another shot, but it didn't happen. So I ended up pulling my arrow, unscrewing my arrow out of the tree, and then trying to find a better setup. I saw like a really nice deadfall I thought might work good for cover. As I'm doing this, there's a doe at like 30 yards just milling around and feeding. And she saw me multiple times, and I just like froze, and then she was like, eh. And it just keeps feeding. So like, I'm kind of getting a grasp on like, okay, these Kansas deer are not the brightest deer. They clearly have not been hunted like our Michigan deer.
Yeah.
But that's also giving me more confidence. Like at this point, I'm like, yeah, dumb deer, I like this. So I get up to the deadfall. And at this point, the doe had worked off. We just decided to kind of construct a blind right there. By the time we got done, like it was pretty freaking sweet. Like it's this old tree stump, and we got these old deadfalls piled up, and then we put limbs and stuff behind us for back cover because the sun was rising at our back. So we were thinking for tomorrow, or at least I was thinking for tomorrow morning, that'll help keep us from getting silhouetted and all that stuff.
And as we're setting it up, we're right where we need to be, for this trail coming through, and there's like the same doe and fawn, I think, from earlier in the morning had walked up like 20 yards right on us, about to enter the little corner that we're right on, and then they we were just walking around broad daylight, and they saw us, and like,
yeah, so we've had deer like around us the entire morning, which is nuts because we're 50 yards from the road. We pull out of there from our morning sit, feeling pretty dang confident for the next morning, but we came back, watched a little bit of TV, and I decided to make everybody stop watching Despicable Me 2 in the middle of the movie so that we can go hike around in 25-mile-an-hour winds to explore a bunch of cattle pasture that turned out to be complete dud.
There's not even any cattle in it. Just poop. Much less deer.
Yeah, that was a complete waste of time. So we went and resighted it. I shot the bow, and I was hitting like 3 inches low and 3 inches right. That was definitely the problem. At first I was thinking it was me, but it was definitely not. It was my gear, which sucks because I should have shot I should have shot my bow way earlier just to double check it. But so yeah, got that fixed. Then we headed back to the spot. We got set up, and I'm like texting my wife pictures of the setup and telling her, hey, we're here, good to go. I'm just chilling, and they're saying something like, there's deer, and I'm like thinking they're joking because this whole time Joshua's been Google searching jokes.
They're good jokes.
Oh my god! Like he's cracking up over him the whole time. He's like, "Guys, let me tell you this one." And I'm like, "Dude, this is really dry."
Hey.
It sucked.
Yeah.
What do you call?
Oh my god.
Them jokes. I think this is funny. He thinks it's dry.
I think it's funny that you're on the edge and the wide angle makes your head look bigger than mine.
Okay. Stupid. What do you call a deer with hooves in his ears?
Nope. Can't answer.
No. That's true. Anything you want. He can't hear you.
Yeah. So I'm putting up with jokes like that.
And I'm just getting started, and then I look over, and like there's a little silhouette of sunshine, and then I see a doe go boink right into it and right over the fence onto our side. And then I see another deer behind it.
And I looked over and I seen the second deer jump over from where I was sitting, and then I seen this little rack kind of follow, and I was like, buck.
And I shot the buck with a little rack.
Yeah. And it was awesome.
Yeah, no, it was sweet though, because so he just chased that doe, and then he stopped pretty much 20 yards from me, was looking at the doe, so he wasn't even aware that we were anywhere in the area. The wind was working perfect for us, and I just drew back, smoked him, double lunged him, and he fell within like 10 steps.
Yeah.
And we were pretty freaking stoked.
It was awesome.
It definitely wasn't like a giant caliber deer that you would want to come out to Kansas for, but for me it was perfect because it verified the setup that we had worked. It was a big confidence booster. It was a filled tag. Like, we didn't waste all this money.
It wasn't another tree.
Wasn't another tree. There's a lot of reasons that was an awesome deer to shoot. But all in all, it was fun. So we shot him and saw all that in only 2 days of hunting. I mean, it seems like a long time because we've been doing a lot every day. It's only been 2 days and we've got a deer down. If you're interested in hunting Kansas and you've never done it before, I'd highly recommend it. This tops pretty much every other out-of-state trip that we've been on. I'll be back if I can, for sure. So,
tips for hunting Kansas.
Yeah, you never hunted before. Tip number 1.
First, locate where bug bucks are.
Where bug bucks?
Where big bucks are.
Yeah, where bug bucks
Get an idea of where they're hanging out.
We saw a lot of big bucks. Tons of big bucks. Finding bucks that are within the vicinity of public was difficult. And we really only had one area where we could say we've seen 1, 2, 3 bucks within like a 2 to 3 mile radius. And that was the area that we ended up focusing in on. Tip number 2.
Go jump all the deer. Find out where they're at. And then go sit there.
Tip number 2, in my opinion, would be finding the public land that has the cover that is going to hold the deer. That was difficult. A ton of the stuff that we were finding was grass fields with the occasional tree, or grass fields with a dry creek bottom with occasional trees. And I'm finding that a lot of it was like travel spots, and the deer were going through it, but it wasn't really actually holding deer. So the spot we killed the buck at, that was actually an area that the deer were going, they were bedding in, and it was an area that was holding deer, and so that was extremely important. And towards the end of our 2-day trip, that's what I was trying to focus more in on my maps and look for.
Tip number 3: don't be afraid of hunting pressure or being pressure by pushing into an area, seeing what you find.
Yeah, so we were super afraid of going into that piece because there's 2 different trucks parked on the corners. And we were like, well, we don't want to mess up their hunt, which, yes, that was very respectful of us. There's 2 trucks parked there. There's probably a reason. And those guys were locals, right? So they knew something was up. Sometimes a truck being parked on the public piece might not be bad. Sometimes that might be good. That might actually give you a hint that, hey, this is indeed a good spot.
Yeah, don't be afraid to push into the spot, too. Because we just started walking in. We're like, we're just hanging close to the road. But as soon as we did, we jumped. Or we didn't jump. We saw those two.
We saw
two
those.
deer walking right out.
We saw those 2 bucks. Yeah, and we were only 50 yards from the road, and it was, the wind wasn't amazing for it. We potentially could be winding deer that were in there that might mess up somebody's hunt. But you know what? Like, sometimes you just gotta take a chance and try to get into the game somehow.
Get on your feet and get out there.
And I think we were realizing, like, if you don't have a setup and you're not actually out there with your bow hunting, you can't shoot the deer because you can't shoot them from the car, even though you see a lot of them from the car.
Unless you're poaching. Don't do that.
Don't poach. Finding a good setup was extremely difficult, and it just took us getting in to the spot to where we were watching deer movement, and then we were realizing what the good setup was. That would probably be tip number 4, which would be let the deer dictate what a good setup is, not sign. I think right now with the rut we have, every single buck was behind a doe. Every single one.
Yeah.
So it's not so much like where's the bucks laying down sign, because that doesn't really matter right now. Like, we scouted a piece on the first day we hunted that had sign everywhere. Rubs, scrapes. Like, you would think that you'd be jumping big bucks left and right, but we didn't jump any big bucks. Whereas this piece that we've had all these encounters in, like, you could see out into the CRP that there was a tree rubbed here and a tree rubbed there. Like, there was sign confirming that, yes, there's big bucks in this area, which we already knew because we saw them with our eyeballs when we were driving the roads. Sign only is, helpful to some extent. It tells you if there's big bucks in the area or if they're traveling certain routes. But really, the absolute best thing to determine what a good setup is deer movement, watching deer movement. Like, I saw one buck do one thing, 3 different bucks did the same thing after that. So if you see one deer do something, take note of that and really put heavy weight on deer movement.
Make sure to know where the chicks are, because the bucks will follow.
Hunt the chicks. Shoot your bow before you start hunting. That'd be a good tip. Then your trip might be done way faster than it will end up being done. Your caffeine wore out.
I need more sugar.
Alas.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I haven't got that much wiser than those tips within this whole 2 days.
We can't
Yep.
give up wisdom.
This is all we
don't
can give you.
have.
This is all we can give you. We've only hunted Kansas for 2 days, but this is what we have learned. Yep, they've proven true, and I think if we were here longer, we'd have more encounters. We'd see more bucks. We'd have more chances at shooting other bucks, bigger bucks, whatever. But I'm happy with how this trip turned out. I've got spots. I've got memories, things I'll remember if I come back. That's always a big plus.
Remember, we're only here for 2 days, so not experts.
We're not experts.
So don't listen to us.
Don't listen to him.
Yeah.
He's got too much caffeine and sugar in his system.
No,
He
the
doesn't know how to
caffeine
handle
went
it.
away. That's the problem.
Alright, anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for putting
Restart.
up with his burps. It was a lot of fun here, and I hope you enjoyed the videos. We tried our best to gather content while still being sane and hunting and doing all that stuff. Thanks for your support, your subscriptions. It's kind of funny because first devotional video I made that has the most views, the whole topic is about being proud of any deer that makes you happy and not getting sucked into the whole pride mentality of killing trophy bucks. And that definitely rings true on this trip because there's a lot of guys that would not think this deer is anything special. I mean, most everybody here in Kansas would pass the deer that I shot. But for me, it was a great end to this trip, and I'm super happy that I shot it. Just for my wife's reaction almost on the phone when I call her, and I'm like, we got one, we're coming home early. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for watching all the Kansas videos. Hopefully we'll have more stuff coming soon. I can't predict the future right now, but we'll be heading back to Michigan and hopefully be filling some tags. So, appreciate your support, and we'll catch you in the next one.